ICQ Podcast episode 285, Icom IC-9700 first impressions. Well, hi there fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 285th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by Charles Bennett, Alpha India 6 Tango Tango, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, and Frank, Foxtrot 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief. And this episode's feature is a first impression of the Icom IC-9700 that we got to look at earlier on this week. Well, as always, it's your donations that keep us advert free. Charles Bennett, Alpha India 6 Tango Tango, kindly is our one-off donor this episode, and he sent a little note saying just enjoy your podcast, so thanks a lot for that wonderful feedback and your investment in the show that keeps us advert free. We also had a donation in the previous episode from Bob Terry, VK2 India Kilo Tango, and he pops along his message for his donation. He reads, "It's refreshing to listen to your podcast, and I really appreciate all the effort and enthusiasm put in by the team. Keep up the good work, and thank you. You're more than welcome." That's from Bob Terry, VK2 India Kilo Tango, based in Sydney, Australia. Previously G4 Foxtrot Victor Charlie, licensed all the way back in 1977. Your donations, along with our monthly and subscription donors, keep the show advert free. We'd ask you to consider us by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate. While you're there as well, there's also the opportunity to have a look at getting your name on an ICQ Podcast Presenters t-shirt by sponsoring our new t-shirts, having your name on the sleeve of the t-shirts. So check that out if you'd like to help us out with that as well. Right, guys, well, we're off now to the guys, Martin, Chris, Dan, Martin, Ed, and Frank, to discuss the latest amateur radio news, including amateur radio online training course has a record year, and D-Star 1 telemetry being received back. Hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode 285 of the News Roundtable. The News Roundtable for 285, I should say. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Martin.
Hiya, and good to have you. Mr. Martin Rothwell's with us, M0SGL. I can't get your call sign all screwed up mine.
Do you know, you mentioned this round table. I wonder if any of us are actually sitting around a circular table. But good evening.
We have done when we did it at Epsom Hospital Radio. Yeah.
One. It was that was a different podcast.
No, it wasn't. It was an ICQ.
No, that was coffee or beer.
Was it?
Actually, yeah.
Okay. We also have, on the other side of the pond to me, Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Good evening, guys. And I actually have a rounded edge on my desk here.
Well, that counts.
That helps. Yeah, you're in keeping. I mean, Leslie could never get the other podcast right, coffee or beer. You had to either drink coffee or beer, and he always said tea. He got bleep for it, didn't he? We also, out in Germany, have Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5 LP. Hi, Ed.
Hi, how on earth did this podcast get to 285 editions?
Oh, God knows, mate. I only committed to do 10. And last but not least, from the other side of the pond from me, we have Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey, great to be with you. And look, in the spirit of the new year, as we obviously haven't sobered up from the old year yet, in Dayton, when we make it, I will have a round if we find a round table.
I think
Perfect. Sounds perfect.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. I'm actually really looking forward to Dayton now. I think it's going to be a hoot. I think it'll be great fun. And I think in some ways, from my point of view, we're probably less well known in the States. So I think it'll be fun. We'll be riding off your celebrity, guys. So it'll be fun.
So what you're looking forward to, then, Martin, is going to an amateur radio show where you can walk from one end of the hall to the other, and people don't say, "Martin."
Yeah. I'm
I think you're going to be surprised, though.
Yeah, I'm not going to read out at the moment, but we have a meeting where we're with Colin on the do's and don'ts of what we're going to do. And if you guys haven't read it yet, the notes, there's a section on what you can and can't do, or suggestions on what you should and shouldn't do when you're there.
The thing is, now that you've mentioned this on the podcast, now you know you've got to inform the listeners.
Yeah, but I can't remember what it is, and I haven't got the document in front of me. But it's something like I'm not allowed more than 2 coffees or something in mine.
I think it was something along the lines of like, Martin Butler is not allowed more than 2 coffees. The person that gives him 3 coffees or the 3rd coffee is 100% responsible for him and his actions for the rest of the day.
Yeah. And something like Chris Howard and Martin Rothwell, when available, are not allowed to get hungry because
there can. I've got it here. There can be issues. It says
there was something about milkshakes as well on there, I think.
Martin is not allowed to be left alone on his own. Failure to keep him under control will result in commitments being made.
Okay, note to self: bring case of Snickers bars. Not yourself.
Yeah, Chris needs that.
You know us too well, Frank.
Oh, Frank, we do have a giggle, but there you go. Right, we've gone mega off topic, but let's get started. Well, we always do, don't we? But we have a bit of fun on this. First news story. Amateur radio online training course has recorded a great year. Essex Hams, 550 people signed up for their online training last year, which was a significant increase over 2017. Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I can do. So, I mean, this is fantastic that the Essex Ham do this. I've never actually, because I also did my foundation course and I kind of with yourself, Martin, actually going back a number of years now, but sat in the classroom. But I think online is the way things are going, and I think they do that number of people in a year is a fantastic number of people. So if this is a way of getting lots of people trained without having to book halls, without having to get in your car and drive somewhere and go out in the cold necessarily this time of year or whatever, and spend. If this means it makes it easier for people to get training, and it looks like it's quality training, then that's the fact they've got that number of people is fantastic. So. And in fact, it was a big increase over the previous year. It sounds like it's getting some traction, and perhaps people are telling their friends about it and promoting it. So I think I know that Pete and the guys at Essex Ham do a great job of promoting the hobby and really getting things moving. So no, I think this is fantastic and great that they got that award last year from the RSGB.
Yeah,
I think it was, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I actually managed to get to chat to them just after they got the award, and there is a YouTube video, and the guys, Pete Sipple, Charlie, and Richard, who's often known as Mr. Dorothy, was there with Dorothy, and I say, Richard, sorry about that, but a great bunch, and the Essex Hams have done really well. Dan, you're a trainer like Chris and I. What's your thoughts on online training?
Oh, I think it's great. I think any new avenue for people to get licenses is wonderful. And in fact, I'm working on an online version of my one-day tech course even as we speak.
Right. So that's hot off the press then, Dan. Hot off the press. Dan,
yeah, it is actually.
Dan does online. Okay, mine. You looking to say you've got something to go on this one?
No, I was just going to say, well, they say 550 people have enrolled. I was up at the National Radio Centre yesterday as we record this, and just chatting to the guys from the RSGB there. They say they did tell me the amount of people they had through the door last year. I don't know if that's knowledge that I'm allowed to pass on, so I'm not going to tell you the number. But the amount of people they get through the door, they just say the interest in amateur radio is absolutely phenomenal. And certainly when people come in and realise they can operate and they can play with things there and they can see this stuff, of course they go away wanting to learn more. And of course we know in the UK courses and places to do them are not always forthcoming. So hats off to Essex Ham for running this. and for getting 550 people enrolled on there. So good for them.
Yeah, I don't think the RSG would have been too upset about you saying how many people came through the door. I'm not sure if I think it might actually be in the RADCOM that hit my desk this morning, although I haven't had a chance to read it fully.
It might be, but I don't know whether that conversation was totally public knowledge, so I'm not going to mention the number straight away.
No, but
it wasn't just a couple of hundred. It was into the the thousands plus, tens of thousands.
Yeah. I think it was in excess of 50,000 from memory, but when they were talking to me back in August time, because we did a video at the National Radio Centre, which is on our YouTube channel. So another plug for that. Ed, what do you think?
Well, the Essex Ham Group, I think, is more of a group than an actual old-fashioned radio club style, and they actually cover the whole of Essex, logically. And you keep hearing about them doing something different, something in the public eye, and promoting the hobby. And this is just yet another thing that they've come up with. So all power to them. Good on them, guys. It's a really good lead that perhaps other groups and clubs could follow and get out there and publicise the hobby and, help amateur radio stay in the news occasionally.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ed. And you don't only have to live in Essex to be invited into Essex Hams, because I've had an invite. I'm technically part of Essex Hams, although I don't live in Essex, and I know Edmund is, and he lives even further away than I do.
And I think this course they run isn't just for people in Essex, of course. It's for anybody who wants to take it.
Oh yeah. Because like us, they're passionate about amateur radio, and they just want to get people into the hobby. And that's one of the things that we've always done at our club is said, if you want to come on one of our training courses, I don't care what club you're a member of, you can come. In the early days, I used to see so many clubs say, if you're not a member of our club, you're not coming on our training course. You have to be a member. And I'm thinking, that's so narrow and short-sighted, because if you're a good club, people will come to you. If you're a rubbish club, you're never going to keep your membership. So if you're worried about losing your membership, you should be worried about that more than getting your members trained, I would suggest.
I know when I did my licenses, my foundation, my intermediate, I did with Chelmsford Amateur Radio Club. And they were very, very welcoming. They didn't care. They were a bit surprised how far I was going to do it from southwest London right the way around to Chelmsford, but I did. And my advanced I did at Reading, who I forget the exact Reading and district maybe. But again, they were very, very welcoming to let someone in that wasn't a member of the club. They weren't worried. But it is a shame when people say you've got to be a member of the club before you can attend. That's not right.
No. What do you think, Frank?
Sorry, just jumping in to update your figures. Over 55,000 visitors to the RSGB's National Radio Centre in Bletchley Park in 2018. Yeah. So that was the number, and that was actually at the start of the GB2RS news last weekend.
Okay,
I knew it was first story, so they're doing well.
Yeah,
another group that's doing well.
Yeah, I knew it was about 50-odd thousand because we were chatting to them back in August. And they were fairly close to 50,000, so I guessed it would have been somewhere around about that. So good one on them. Frank, what's your thoughts?
Oh, I'm very positive about this, and there's two quick thoughts I have. One is that the motto of every club should be some version of "we do stuff," and I think it was acknowledged that this group is always doing things, and I think that's just part and parcel of being a good club. The other thing is that I've been, as a college professor before I retired, I began using email to extend regular lecture hall courses back in the early 1980s. And so I've done a lot of online teaching and things like that, although not on ham radio. I am a ARL certified trainer. But the demography of groups is important because as we worry about aging out our current ham population and getting new folk in, remember these young folk have been born into this kind of technology. So it's just not a barrier in general to their learning. So I'm very excited about this story.
Yeah, I agree with you. We have to move with the times, and whereas years ago I mean, the first time I looked at doing the amateur radio course, the guy teaching it was so disinterested that he actually put me off the hobby. And I could have been in the hobby, say, 20 years earlier. So, you know, having an online where you've got support and people passionate is great. And that's the way people want to learn, as you say. Moving on, second news story. D-Star 1 is now being launched. Ed, you were saying that this was the one that blew up on the launch pad about 12 months ago or so, wasn't you?
Yeah, I think it was like 10 or 12 months. We covered it on the podcast as well. What's interesting about this one and that one as well is that these two satellites for D-Star that are up there, they're actually produced by a commercial company in Germany, and rather than being built by radio amateurs, this is actually a commercial company whose main business is actually arranging launches for other companies, called German Orbital Systems. I'm pretty sure they're based out of Berlin. And yeah, on December 27th of 2018, D-Star 1 Sparrow and D-Star 1 ISAT were successfully launched, and recently they're getting the telemetry from it. So I guess we're soon going to have those operational as D-Star repeaters flying around the Earth at a heck of a speed. So it'd be interesting to see how that all works from down here on Earth.
Yeah, sounds good. Martin, you're the person probably in this group that favours D-Star the most. What's your thoughts?
I love it. I'm very excited about this. I need to do satellites. If I get my head around satellites, then D-Star will definitely follow. I'm curious about how this will work with things like the Doppler shift, because it's a digital signal. I wonder if that's going to affect it. I think that's something to experiment with. But I'm very excited that there's now two up there to play with, especially as D-Star, of course, is the original digital mode for amateur radio, isn't it? It was designed by amateurs for amateurs. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I'm interested in what it says, though. D-Star 1 Sparrow operates as a half-duplex repeater. Well, isn't that all repeaters half duplex?
Doesn't that mean it's a parrot repeater? So you talk up to it, stop, and it talks back down what you sent.
437,325, downlink 435,525. So it's got two separate frequencies.
So
you'd think it was
need to be then, should it? Yeah.
We'd have to look into that, I think, to look at the details and what that means. But
there was years ago a D-Star repeater up there as well, but I presume that's burnt up in the atmosphere a few years back. Yeah. So, as you say, Doppler shift is the same thing I wondered about this, whether that's going to give you problems. But anyway, that's what they're experimenting with, I guess.
Experimentation, isn't it? That's what it's all about.
Yep.
Well, I think it's interesting what you were saying at the start was that this is both a commercial communication satellite and an amateur radio satellite. So this is similar to the SHL-2 satellite that I think the Qataris have put up in space, where they've also got it's a commercial satellite, and we're kind of piggybacking on the back of it, which I think is great. It means that we get to put something up there, and they don't mind us kind of having a little space on there for what we want to do. So if we can help them by helping to do testing, etc., and then we get a benefit of having an amateur piece of kit up there as well, and I think we kind of, it's a win-win, isn't it? Really,
it's a back scratching thing, isn't it? You scratch our back, we'll scratch your sort of thing.
My understanding of reading this and what I've read elsewhere is that this isn't a commercial satellite. Well, this is from a commercial company, but they're using D-Star on the satellite on the amateur bands. So I presume there's some amateurs involved in the company. I don't believe this is an extra payload on an existing commercial satellite as SHL-2 is.
Right.
I think this is purely that they're saying this is a company that, as I say, up to now have been involved with arranging launches for other people, and they're now getting into actually building and launching their own satellites. And I think they're using the fact that it's an amateur satellite, and somebody made the comment in our pre-show talk, you've got a good number of beta testers out there that will let you know very quickly if something isn't working right with the amateur gear. And I could be wrong, but my understanding is these satellites only do amateur D-Star.
Okay.
Do you reckon the reason they're trying D-Star and the fact that they're trying digital is because, you know, the technology already exists, you know, to do digital via a geostationary satellite? Maybe they're trying to take into account the fact that this is a satellite that is going to move. I forget what they call it. A satellite that's going to
low Earth orbit.
Low Earth orbit satellite.
Yeah.
the fact that it is digital, they're trying to experiment, and D-Star was like the obvious choice. Hey, okay, we want to experiment with it. Let's put D-Star on rather than putting on the typical analog transponder.
Yeah, could be, and they could have some other digital mode lined up for commercial usage. Maybe. If this works right on a different frequency, of course, on another satellite.
Maybe.
All very interesting.
Certainly is. Frank, you any thoughts on this one?
Yes, I actually own a D-Star repeater. It's situated in my hometown of Sandersville, Georgia, with a new club there, and I donated one to help them out, and have a 5100A that I embarrassingly just have not taken out of the box and installed it. That bad on me. I will try to do that. So I'm a D-Star fan. I'm delighted at this because, innovation begets fragmentation. And we've had the fragmentation of DMR fusion, D-Star et al. And yet that pushes us to get better at many things. And I think this will do that by entering this digital mode into the satellite sphere. I want to personally learn a little more about the telemetry format, and we have some links in our show notes that will give a decoder and some formats and some things like that. A lot of people, for example, don't really get the difference between APRS and DAPRS. DAPRS, it's a different transport for similar information. So it probably doesn't do DAPRS in the telemetry. But the point is that this experimentation, I think, will push all of us in amateur radio toward a better understanding. So I think it's a great experiment.
Yeah, great answer, Frank. Now, poor Dan's probably feeling left out in the cold because being a Morse man, I doubt if you do D-Star, do you, Dan?
Well, no, actually, I'm getting into this digital VHF stuff. We've just put up a DMR repeater here in Ann Arbor, so but I'm not big on D-Star. I don't know that much about it, and even though this is probably a good thing, it just doesn't float my boat.
No, but then that's what the hobby's about, Dan.
I agree, and I agree. So that and that's fine. Like I say, I think it's a good thing, but. For me personally, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, there's lots of things in amateur radio that don't float my boat as well, Dan, but I like to know about them, but I wouldn't necessarily want to do them. So I think you're in the same position as I am on this one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But remember, Dan is, of course, patron of the original digital mode for amateur radio.
Yeah, he is.
CW. Yeah. Original ons and offs, zeros and ones.
Yeah, the diddly-dar dits.
You speak for yourself.
Oh, behave. Okay, moving on to our next news story. VHF UHF workshop to boost activity above 30 megs. Now, this is the South African radio guys and the South African AMSAT boys. I think where we are at the moment with the sunspot cycle probably at the low, not a lot happening. I think lots of people, as countries have done away with the Morse, that people have all gone down onto HF, and VHF UHF does seem very quiet. And considering that Icom have just released this super duper new radio, the 9700, is it, Martin?
It's 9700, not out yet, but it is very, very soon.
Yeah, maybe this is a good thing that people are starting to get all fired up about. What do you think, Mike?
Well, anything that promotes activity on any band has got to be a good thing, hasn't it? We have lots of bands, and there are lots of quiet spaces that people could be using that they're not. I appreciate HF, of course, very quiet at the moment. We know that that's not through the fault of anybody on the ground. That is just the conditions. But anything that boosts activity above 30 megahertz, great. I was up on 23 SEMS last night, and a lot of people saying there was a lift on there. I didn't realise that even happened on 23 SEMS, but there were GM stations people were calling. I couldn't hear them. But yeah, if there's something that promotes use on another band, I'm all for it.
Yeah, sounds good to me. And the other thing is that it's not just VHF and UHF is not just FM. All right, FM.
No, you can do SSB as well, yeah.
Well,
digital voice.
You can even do Morse on it, can't you, Dan?
Well, yeah. So there's it seems to me that we kind of lost this, right? I mean, it used to be these weak signal modes were very popular on VHF and UHF, and when FM kind of just swept it all away. But there's some fun things to be done here, and this will hopefully teach people how to do that and can have fun doing it.
Yeah, because I think we miss out on a lot of this thing if we're not careful. Frank, any thoughts from you on this one?
In general, and I like what they're doing with the beaconing, like the reverse beacon network, and they're using that as kind of a lightning rod, if you will, or divining rod if you're looking for water, to try to see where there are openings, because they tend to be very short-lived. And, for years, people like Gordon West on the west coast of the U.S. Listening for that 10-meter beacon from Hawaii, and folks on the west coast would try to traverse the Pacific Ocean to Hawaii and looking at 6 meters. So getting up into the higher regions here and maybe applying some of these same general approaches, I think is very cool. Now, I'll say this tongue in cheek. We have a lot of hams that will say, oh, but Martin Rothwell, that's not real ham radio because it uses the internet. And yet they're the same DXers that use the internet for all their DX spotting work. Can we say hypocritical here? But so I'm just delighted that they're bridging lots of technology to make communications work.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that I think that you have to have people around listening. Now, our club a couple of years ago took part in a low power contest, low power SSB contest. We were about 15 miles south of London on Epsom Downs. And we were talking to a station in Scotland. The FT817 was in 2.5 watt mode. All right, the antenna we were using had a 10 dB gain. So it's effectively an ERP of 25 watts.
How much gain was in the linear amplifier, Martin? No, I'm only kidding, sorry.
No. But on that day, we worked Scotland, Northern Ireland, down into Wales on effectively an 817 running 2.5 watts, all right, with a 10 dB gain antenna. We weren't hundreds of meters high in the air. We were quite high up on the downs, and we had a mast that was probably 3 or 4 meters high. It can be done, but people just think it can't be done, I think. What do you think, Chris? Yes, it is.
I mean, I was there, and we worked Scotland on a very low amount of power. So I think if you try hard enough, you can. Obviously, that was a contest, so we were trying fairly hard. It can be done, and just to give it a bit of promotion. So this is on the 9th of February. The South African Amateur Radio League National Amateur Radio Centre. Yeah, and the comments about the reverse beacon network, absolutely, that's a very useful tool. Similar, I think, to the Whisper network, where you can sort of see what's in real time, who can hear who. So I think that's quite a powerful tool. And if they can use it also didn't realise it was also used on VHF and UHF. So if that is the case, I think they're also talking about a beacon as well within their region. So I think it promotes activity on a new part of our spectrum, or the spectrum. Then that's pretty good.
Yeah, sounds good. Ed, I know you do a lot of SOTA. Do you do much VHF from a SOTA?
Germany, no. In the UK, I'd say probably a third of all SOTA activations, or even a half of VHF, and a mixture of mostly FM, but some sideband and CW as well. But I left the hobby about 40 years ago, and at that time there was a lot more activity on VHF and UHF than there is today. And as I think was said by somebody a little while ago, I think the fact that everybody got HF rights around 2000 and whatever it was, 2003 or something, meant that a lot of people left, unfortunately, VHF and UHF, and went on to HF and never came back. And, there are things about VHF and UHF operation that, no, you're not going to get around the world on it. But if you get from Yorkshire across to Holland or to Belgium or somewhere, or as there has been happening, openings from the south of England down to Portugal and Spain last week, that's a great thrill. Everything's relative. And a lot of people are losing out on not being on VHF and UHF A lot of people don't even realise you can do that. A lot of people think of VHF, UHF as only repeaters, and that's only one very small part. Sideband and CW, well, you know, it's a shame, really, and it's good that the South Africans are doing something to promote activity above 30 megs, and I think somebody else should be doing that as well. Whether the 9700 is a great rig, as somebody said, we'll wait and see. I've been on that news list for the last year, and from everything I've heard, it sounds like it will be, and it's in the same family as the 7300 that I have, so it's like the brother to that. So I am rather tempted to get my hands on that and see how it performs as well.
Play with one. They are seriously. I need to save my pennies.
Yeah, I thought you might say that. And,
I had my hands on one yesterday.
Yeah. The fact it's got 23 SEMs in it as well is also very positive because...
and D-Star as standard.
Yeah, that's just a waste of money, but never mind. For me, I've got no D-Star repeaters around here.
Well, you can work that satellite now.
Yeah,
well, that's true. That's true.
There you go. Okay. So, Ed, take it back. No longer a waste of money.
For me, it's a waste of money compared to, say, DMR or whatever, because those repeaters are everywhere here. But D-Star, unfortunately, they're all gone. But anyway, they're getting off the subject. VHF, UHF, and specifically sideband and CW, and of course FT8 and other digital modes. I'd love to see a lot more activity on those bands. And at the moment, you know, there are openings happening. And, you know, since we're talking about above 30 megs, you also should consider sporadic heat on 6 meters and 4 meters, etc. And, you know, it seems to be a lost art that people aren't there anymore. It's a real shame.
Martin, let me chime in one little PS on here that I think is relevant. You know, part of the reason things get lost is there aren't events and activities. You know, and Ed's a big soda activator, and for example, and that's an event organized around a locale, and working from those. My former club in Atlanta, the Atlanta Radio Club, Bill Perkins, KB4KFT, came up with the concept of a local de-expedition. For example, it might be everybody that's kind of in the Atlanta area, 20 counties make up that metro area. At lunch, have a 10-meter radio and go out and get on this frequency on 10-meter sideband, and let's see who can talk to who. Or one of us is going on a business trip a state away, and we'll be on around this frequency and see who can work them. And so it provides an event for the group to get out and practice. And I think this kind of thing will fit with VHF, UHF very well. On the other hand, you can say, well, people just don't get on the simplex frequency. Well, to some degree, we're like sheep and we need herding, and these kind of events help do that.
Well, there are VHF, UHF contests, of course.
Well, and
which is about... Well. Sorry?
And activity evenings as well.
Yeah, yeah. And that's when you hear the people on, I guess, at the moment. It's just... you know, I remember being on and being, you know, hearing people on every night, but you know, it's not the same anymore.
It's the time of the year as well as what's going on, isn't it? What people are doing in their lives, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Sorry, Frank.
So it's a short distance communication mode in general, though. Instead of having national you know, that's what I'm saying. Having something that's more of a localized area that would generate that activity. That's all I was going to throw in.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I just make another point as well? Well, we mentioned briefly digital modes. I mean, D-Star, Fusion, DMR. You're not also reliant on repeaters. You can do very easily simplex. You just switch to the digital mode of your radio. It's another way of getting on air, and you know the digital mode will go where an FM mode may not.
And in fact, that's what you do with on SOTA activations as well. If you're running digital voice on SOTA, you run simplex.
And that's the same whichever digital mode that you happen to be in, whichever camp.
Yeah.
Well, I think what was coming out of this is you know, you don't only have to use a repeater, because Martin and I have certainly worked simplex on digital modes. You don't only have to wait for somebody else to do it. I think a lot of things, and you're dead right, Frank, is that if you have a purpose to do something, if there's something happening, if there's an event going on, then it's worthwhile getting out there and doing it. If you said to me, what operating you're going to do this weekend, I'd probably look at you blank. if I had a purpose to go out and operate this weekend, I'd probably operate a lot more than I will this weekend. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that unless you've got a purpose, it's all too easy in our busy lives to get hijacked. And don't dispel the poor little 817. It might only be 5 watts, but I only bought my FT817 for VHF and UHF, believe it or not, because I already had a QRP HF rig. So, anyway.
And for the higher bands, Martin, you know what rig is the one that's used to transvert up from by more people than anything else?
Go on.
FT817.
Yeah.
If you're going to microwaves, you drive it with an FT817 in 90% of the cases.
Yeah, they do now. They used to, when I first started, they used to use an FT290, but they're a bit old and long in the tooth now. But yeah. Right, moving on. Something that'll interest Dan, or either make him explode. The new ham radio general class question pool has been released. So a lot of work for you, isn't it, Dan?
Yep, and it looks like there's quite a bit of work, actually. So out of the 600 or so questions in here, according to Fred Benson, I forget his call sign, who does a real analysis of the question pool, there's only 192 questions that have not changed at all. And a lot of the changes are just sort of typo correction and small minor differences. But that means that there's like 400 questions that actually have changed. So that's going to be a lot of rewriting for me.
Well, a lot of rewriting. And as I say, I know it's not just you rewriting the questions. You actually give a comment on the answer and explain the answer. So, it's more than that for you, and it's like 2/3 of the questions you got to fiddle with.
Well, so if the question has not changed from a meaning point of view, then maybe I won't have to rewrite that section, but I'll have to make sure I get the new question and the new correct answer in there correctly, right? Like for example, there's one question I saw where the answer was changed. All of these choices are correct to all these choices are correct, right? That's the change in that question. So I don't have to rewrite the explanation of that topic, but I do have to make sure I change the answer to the question in the study guide. See what I'm saying? So it might not be quite so much work as I think, but it'll still be a lot of grinding on making sure I get all the words right.
Yeah, and as I say, it's an interesting thing. None of us are looking to do our general class. I would suggest in the next few months. So, because you, Dan, and Chris, yourself, Dan, and Frank and I have all done it. So we ain't going to do it. Hi. But what do you think, Frank?
This is just the evolution of the way we do the exams, and it's always a little bit, if not occasionally, somewhat a great deal of subjectivity on what's important to know. So, there are these periods with, and, we've had a lot of change here, the stuff we've been talking about, digital modes and things of that nature, SDR, those things have kind of evolved into it. It's just part of that cultural mix. I kind of defer to Dan's comments. He's kind of the leading expert on this, given what he does with his writing and stuff. But it's more work, more to do.
Yeah. Well, I think we're very lucky in that with all of you guys, we have a good breadth of knowledge across the hobby. We're all interested in different things, and we can all bring different things to the table. Ed, you got any thoughts on this one?
Not really. Can't really add anything to what other people have said. Just. I think it was Frank that said this is something that happens on a regular basis every few years, that they add new questions and bring them up to date.
Yeah, it does. Dan hasn't hijacked you to do one of his classes out in Dayton, has he? And, make you do the exam.
Why would I bother? I don't need to.
No,
the problem with taking the US exams is, as soon as you take the lower levels, the technician or in this case the general, you can no longer operate under the CEPT rules as a full.
That's true.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
So unless you're going to do all three and be confident you're passing them all, and some people do that because there are certain countries in the world that aren't members of CEPT, haven't signed up to CEPT, but do have exchange agreements with the US and nobody else. And if you want a reciprocal license, one way to get it in some of these, small Asian countries is to get a US license and then convert it to a Thailand license or whatever.
Right.
But other than that, nah. I'll be operating under the CEPT regs when we go over.
Yeah. Now I'm going to show my ignorance before I bring Chris and Martin in. I'm going to show my ignorance. If I were to operate as with a UK call sign, and I can't because I've got an American call sign, would I prefix it with N, W, or K?
I think you probably could do any of them, but W is the
W is the normal, isn't it? W, and then the number of whatever region you're in.
Correct.
So in our case, for Ohio, it's what?
8.
8, yeah, W8.
All right. Okay. And you're region 6 down, are you?
Well, I got my call sign when I lived in California.
All right.
So that's why I have a 6 in my call sign. But I live in Michigan, which is the 8th call district.
All right. Okay. Well, you got a 9 in your district as well. Mine's with you.
Yeah.
And Chris's. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I think Dan's got a lot of work ahead of him, hasn't he, really, to get all these questions updated. I guess that's part of it. I guess that goes with the territory, doesn't it, Dan, a little bit? Although it looks like it's going to be around for another, is it 4 years it lasts now when this gets released?
Yeah, it's 4 years. So it's a fair amount of work, but it's good for 4 years, and personally it's worth it to me.
And then you get to go on to the extra one and do that one again, and then you got the technician. And
well, then we have a year off. So it's
right.
So technician, general, extra, and then a year off.
And this is July, I think, isn't it, when this comes into effect? So you got a little bit.
Right.
Well.
So I wanted to mention that. So we're talking about changing the question pool, but as far as people taking the test, you still have till the end of June to take the test with the current question pool. The question pool won't change in the actual test you take until July 1st.
And I guess ultimately, even if you haven't necessarily got the latest book with the latest question pool on it, if you've learnt the material, if you know the concepts, if you understand the syllabus and you understand what it's all about, actually, you can still pass the exam. You don't necessarily need to have seen the book with the latest question pool. I'm sure they'd love to buy a new book, Dan, but I'm sure that you can still, as long as you understand the material, understand the concepts, I'm sure you can still go ahead and take the exam.
Oh, sure. And, probably you'll have probably pass. But, sometimes they add questions about the rules, for example. And, when you have those questions, you really have to just memorize the answer because, there's no electrical principle involved, right?
Right. Yeah.
So a lot of those kind of operating practice questions and rules questions, you just got to memorize the answer. So if they've added those, and I haven't done a full analysis yet myself, you might miss those if you didn't get the proper study guide for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I did mine, there were certain things that I glossed over very quickly because they were common electrical or common radio between everybody everywhere in the world, because that's just how radio works. But it was certain things that were different in the States to the UK. Your operating procedures, your licensing, and some of the things, because you're allowed that much more power than us. It was
and don't forget, Martin, very similar here in the UK in August, there'll be a change to the exams here, and we need to make sure that we have our training material updated, because that's not just the questions changing, it's actually a complete change of syllabus. So we've got a lot of work to do between now and then to make sure everything is up to date, and our materials are can be for the new exams.
And Chris, that's not just one exam that's changing, is it? There's 2 or 3 of them that are changing.
That's right, 3 exams. That's right. All 3 exams are changing. I believe. I'm not sure
the dates across all 3 are changing.
I believe. Yeah, I think it's August for all 3.
Or September, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah. So, and then people that, to be fair, there are folks out there on the internet that have done a lot. In fact, we talked about Essex Hammer. I know that that Pete there has done a fair bit of work on his website talking about the changes and things. So there are folks that are already doing work on it, which is great, which will help us all out in the sort of teaching community when it comes out, our turn to update our PowerPoint slides, etc.
Yeah, I had a chat with a guy at the RSGB convention. Oh, sorry, not the RSGB convention. I had a chat with a guy at National Hamfest and I'm terribly sorry I can't remember his name. We did a video on YouTube talking about the changes and why they're being made. So, yeah, there's a lot happening. Martin, you've been very quiet on this one, but you're our chief examiner, aren't you?
I believe so, unless something's changed. I haven't been there in a while, but I guess it's just work and stuff getting in the way. Perhaps I'm opening a can of worms by saying this, and I don't want to upset anybody, but I'm still not convinced that releasing a pool of questions to people, to the general public, so it's publicly known, is the right way of doing things. Because there are people that can just memorize questions and answers, but not know how to get to the answers or not know how to work things out, and therefore operate things safely. Personally, I'm more in favour of not releasing this or more information. Yes, it might mean a few less people get licensed, but at least then the people that do get licensed actually know what they're doing before they get let loose on, effectively 1.5 kilowatts of power at God knows what frequency. Maybe I'm being, I'm being too mean by saying that, but that's just my thought on it initially.
Well, I tell you what, even when the questions weren't released publicly, you still had people passing like the general class test without really knowing what they were doing.
Yeah,
I'm a case in point. I got my general class license when I was 17 years old. Hey, I didn't know what I was doing, and of course the power limit was only 1,000 watts at that point. But still,
only 1,000. That's only 600 watts more than we're allowed on a full license.
Let me chime in here too, given I've been a professional educator for a while, and here's something I just don't know. When you get a driver's license in England, for example. Mm-hmm. There's a test, and do you get behind the wheel and do something and show you can not run over too many people?
There's two. You have a theory test, which is they give you all the what's the stopping distance. I couldn't tell you the stopping distance.
Yeah.
I can point at it. But you do a theory test where you get like 30 odd questions or something it was when I did it. And you do like a practical test as well. They take you out on the road.
My father was a state trooper in Georgia when I was young, and he got hurt making an arrest. And so he hurt his back. So they put him in charge of the printing shop, which he printed all of the tests for the whole state and the books. And so in my household, when I was 35 years old and I moved and I had to get a new driver's license in another state, I was very nervous. And my wife said, "Why are you nervous about just taking a driver's license test? You give tests for a living." I said, "Well, you didn't understand. It was a sin to miss one question in my household because my dad saw those things every day." And now here's the question I'm begging. And Martin, you kind of said this. What is the purpose, particularly of a technician license? You can kind of go on up to whatever. Are you supposed to be fully knowledgeable to operate amateur radio after you take that test? Or is it similar to a driver's license in the U.S., where you pass a minimum of theory and you don't run over too many people?
Well, they teach you to pass the test rather than to drive. You learn to drive in the first couple of years, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, the point is that you get permission in something that is licensed and technically regulated, even though if you listen to a few frequencies, you think it's not regulated at all. And so then you learn by doing. But
the foundation license is... Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so the purpose of the exam is to show a minimum competency.
Yeah.
And you're not necessarily, you learn by driving, not by taking the test. And I'm not trying to dumb down anything. I'm just trying to give a different, it begs the question of what is the purpose of the philosophy of the test.
Yeah. I mean, I'm only playing devil's advocate by saying that. I mean, foundation license in the UK, I guess the equivalent of your technician license, is very limited. There are you don't get access to 23 SEMS and above. You only get 10 watts of power. So you can do less damage. Let's put it that way. That's the only reason I'm coming. I appreciate the rules and what you get in the States are very different.
In fact, actually, it's funny you talk about that analogy with the driving test. In fact, my niece passed the test today, actually, 17 years old. But I found out today, and I think I vaguely saw it recall seeing on the news. There's a new they're changing the rules over here now, where you certainly up until very recently, as a learner driver, you were not allowed to go on the motorway. You're not allowed to go on the highway, so you couldn't get experience of that until you'd passed your test, sat on your own in a car with cars going at 70 miles an hour, overtaking you and all that sort of thing. I believe now there's a new rule that allows a learner driver to go on the motorway with a qualified instructor. So you're not sat there on your own. You've got someone sat next to you telling you what to do, giving you guidance and helping you along. And I think that's probably very similar to what I think Frank was describing in terms of, you aren't just putting at the deep ends. So I thought it was quite a good analogy, that's all.
Yeah. Well, Chris, part of the German driving license, the requirement is that you do a certain number of hours on the autobahns with the instructor, and it's been like that for last
and if you come
years
back,
or whatever,
and
it's a good idea.
And if you come back and survive, you can take your exam.
Absolutely.
But no. You actually build up a number of hours over a number of lessons.
Sure. We have something called a learner's permit. And Dan, in Michigan, do they have a learner's permit?
They did when I took it. I'm not sure nowadays.
Yeah, I'm not either. But part of it is you can drive, but on the supervision of a fully licensed driver. So you get a little bit of that.
This may be one. I mean, okay, we've gone way off topic, but I would just mention this one thing. Nowadays, they teach you have to be able to program a sat nav, for example. Oh. But the one thing they don't teach you, that from our point of view would probably be quite useful, would be how to switch repeaters when you're driving and how to use a fist mic when you're driving. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Well, just to really throw the hand grenade in the room, when I took my test, the man walked in front of the car with a red flag. No, I'm not that old. No, I'm not
Martin,
that old.
just a quick one. You mentioned at the start about the RSGB, and we interviewed the chap, or you interviewed a chap at the National Handfest. It was Professor Tony Kent.
Yeah, Tony Kent's a real nice guy.
He was the chap, G8PBH. He was the chairman of the Exam Standards Committee.
Yeah, a real nice guy, and he gave us a lot of information. So, a good follow-up. And just one last thing on this, Martin, and I'm jumping to the Dan's and Frank's defence on this. There are so many questions, and some of them are very, very, very similar. Yes, I will give you the odd question stands out like a sore thumb, and you go, oh, God, that's so obvious that's it, or you learn that particular one. But 90% of the questions, you have to reason them out. You can't.
That's fair enough. I'm only saying it because I've never seen the American test.
Yeah, you can't.
I'm sitting on the other side of the fence for balance purposes. Yeah. Come on, I'm a professional broadcaster. I have to do this.
Yeah, Colin still has my technician general books. I think I could probably find the advanced one and show you that. Okay. But you would never, ever remember all the questions. You remember the old one because it smacks you in the face, but there are so many that are very similar. Is that correct, Dan, or not?
Well, some guys tell me that they just memorize everything. So I don't know. I'll just throw one more idea out. Even if you did memorize all the answers, right? Even in that process, you're bound to learn something.
Yeah, I guess right?
So, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'm not that clever, Dan. Hi. Anyway, let's.
Yeah, what I was saying was that amateurlogic.tv, they do a training course every second broadcast or whatever, and I think they've just finished the general, so they're now going to have to start the whole course again because they change questions because they go through every single question. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, keep them busy for a while.
But if you bought Dan's book, you'd have it in your hands. So there you go, Dan. They don't listen. They should buy your book.
I tell you what, I'll give you a discount on it. No, I'll send it to you if you're really going to do it.
Yeah. No, I've done it. I've done it. Honest.
No, I'm talking about Ed. I know you've done it.
Yeah.
No reason for the headache.
Yeah. How I got the extra, I don't know, but I did it. Anyway, come on, let's move on.
I witnessed it, actually, didn't I, Martin? I was sat next to you.
Hey?
I was sat next to you, wasn't I, when you did it?
Yeah, you was.
Are you helping him?
No.
No, he had a different question paper to me. Right, moving on. Come on, let's move on. radio ebooks on for download, and this is the Gutenberg site. We'll put links up on our website, but some interesting ebooks there, although I'm going to get Ed to go first, not just to rub salt in the wound, but Ed can't get to them, unfortunately, can you, Ed?
Yeah, ebooks up at the Gutenberg site. The only problem is for anybody living in Germany, you can't access it. They've got it geo-blocked because of a ruling in a German court last year. So I can't even review what's supposed to be these books are supposed to be. The 1922 edition of the Radiometer's Handbook. Yeah, don't know. I found some old RSGB Radcoms online, but not as far back as 1922. So that could be quite an interesting one to look at.
Yeah,
it looks like there are 75 books in this collection relating to radio, which is, and I'm browsing through some of the titles here. They actually look quite interesting. They're in various formats that you can get either read it as HTML or you can download it as an EPUB, which seems to open in Google in your browser so you can sort of get the right formatting as if it's a book. Or I think there's also a Kindle version as well. So each of these files. So actually, it looks like it's pretty well managed. And yeah, some of these look like quite interesting topics. So I'm not sure the age of some of these, but yeah, some of these look. I think it mentions about the Radio Amateur's Handbook by Frederick Collins, for example, which I believe might be related to the Collins company. Is that right?
I don't know. What do you think, Dan?
I don't know. I wouldn't think so.
That was Arthur Collins.
Yeah,
and A may be Arthur. I don't know.
I could be. Frederick Collins. Could be. In fact, there's a Wikipedia. Archie. Oh, yeah, it could be. Archie Frederick Collins, who, yes, I think it actually is him, looking at his Wikipedia page. It looks like he's heavily involved in. So I'm guessing it probably is related to the Collins. Here we go. Yeah, the Collins Wireless Telephone Company.
Oh,
so there
okay.
we go. So yeah, you can read his book. What he thought about radio back in 1922.
Excellent.
And the technology won't have changed much, will it, Dan? I mean, theory, the electronics is, be it valve or tubes, as you guys call it, or transistors, doesn't change that much, does it?
Well, what I always say is the physics of antennas certainly haven't changed. So
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's some interesting stuff out there.
Did you just look at a chapter on software-defined radio? No, I'm joking.
No. There was some interesting sort of light reading. Let's put it this way: light reading. Some of them were fiction, based with radio as part of the story, which I suppose is not bad for beach reading on your Kindle or. As I go to work on the tube, I started reading one of them just for the fun of it. They're a little bit old. The language is a bit not as up to date as today, but it was interesting. And I think I saw Mr. Rothwell downloading them on his phone as we were talking. Did you mind?
No, I wasn't downloading. I was just having a look. I'm just having a look now. My initial question was, do I need an e-reader like a Kindle or something to read this? But having clicked on this, Project Gutenberg offers 58,636 free ebooks to download. I don't think they're all related to radio, but clicking on them, for example, you get HTML, EPUB with and without images, Kindle with and without images, and plain text UTF. So yeah, it appears you don't even need specific hardware or specific software in order to open this. You just click on it and you've got a page you can just scroll down within your normal browser, whether you Chrome, Firefox, whatever. Just works. So I'm not a big reader, but radio related, I might have a skim through, see if there's anything that tickles my fancy.
Yeah.
I'm looking at this book that Mr. Collins wrote. It talks about, I'll read a little quote. The transmitter of a wireless telegraph set Germany needed a spark gap for setting the electric oscillations. That might be slightly out of date.
Yeah, but it's
how do you tune that?
I'm sure you can, but yeah.
Yeah. But it's where we came from, guys. It's
absolutely, no. And like Dan says, the aerial section will be absolutely relevant. Absolutely, yeah.
Martin, let me add a couple of things. The translation thing, there are some websites where you just download it, whether it's a Deja Vu, DJ, VU, EPUB, Mobi, PDF, whatever. There are free websites where will translate it for you, and there's also some downloadable software that will translate from one format to another. So that's not too bad. I added in our show notes another website, archive.org, which is kind of the Internet Archive, and we'll have a link in the show notes to a query on amateur radio. And you'll find a lot of similar kinds of things freely available through archive.org. And one thing we really haven't touched on is while there's a lot of older stuff, and maybe even a novel called "She Came In Through the Ether," which is, I guess, the Beatles, based their hit song "She Came In Through the Bathroom Window" off of that, and just replaced radio with that. Hi, I think, as we say. But so there you go. I mean, there's another whole archive out there, and it's worth looking at. The thing that I was trying to get to, and I was trying to raise a joke in this crew, and it's a hard audience all of a sudden, for a little laughter. But is that there are schematics on older radios that you might find very instrumentally useful as opposed to just kind of novel. So that's another thing, looking up old schematics. So you might have an old Swan 550 rig, and there may be something about a mod there. There may be a classic valve radio that, was being built, and those things were there. So there's also some practical stuff.
I remember getting a book in the 70s because I was a radio TV repairer back in the 70s. And I remember buying a book, and it was from the very, very early days of the TV in the 40s. And some of the circuitry, you think that the stuff would have been very basic, but the circuitry was all there. And they worked it all out, and as we move forward, it was just improvements. But the basic physics, as Dan says, is the same. So... I think some of this stuff is well worth a look. And sorry you can't get it, Ed, unless you VPN out of Germany on a different line somehow. Frank, you put the last news story in. Court rules excessive antenna application fees violated reasonable accommodation. I'm going to let you lead on this one, Frank, because...
Well, we've talked a good bit about this with the Amateur Radio Parity Act and some other things, but the upshot of this story is that a court in the state of New York ruled in favor of a ham, Miles Landstein, into EHG, in that his city had overstepped the state authority by charging him just way too much money to try to get an antenna and a small 70-foot antenna support structure variance. So they pounded on his good head, and the judge ruled that they were in violation of the PRB1 federal preemption requiring reasonable accommodation. And so I think it's important to note that the court gave the ham not only a fair hearing, but they said bad on the town that caused him to spend over $17,000 in connection, or rather the city spent $17,000 to process his applications. Isn't that what his taxes were paying for? And so he was asked to reimburse them before they could give him a ruling. So the ARL helped with this in terms of their legal support group. And I just think it's important to know that a court is now setting a precedent that enforced PRB1, and that precedent, heretofore, I'm told by attorneys who know more than I, can be used in other types of litigation with municipalities. So the ham wins in this case, and thanks partly to the support by the ARL.
Yeah, one for the little guy. That's a good one. But I like your style, Frank. That's just a little 70-foot tower, I mean, that's over in the UK. We're killed with that. I like your sport. Dan, what do you think?
Well, I think Frank's right. In the U.S. courts anyway, precedent is paramount. So this sets a nice precedent, and we can look forward to progress on this front.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, we know the higher in the air you get an antenna, the better, because Martin's repeater sits God knows how many meters up in the air, the repeater on the top of the hospital, and runs 2 watts and covers the whole of London. It runs less power than the walkie-talkies or the handy-talkies that are communicating with it, doesn't it, Martin?
Which is the irony. It's probably running less at the moment because someone very helpfully let water into its coax. Yeah, and it covers. God, it goes miles. There's a few weird black spots locally, but heading north and north of London, it goes for miles. And I know we do interfere with a repeater up near Cambridge somewhere. Certainly when the conditions are right. So, whoops, sorry about that. Yeah, 70-foot tower though. Yeah, they're only a 70-foot tower. Wish my antennas were that high. Simple vertical on the side of the house, one on the chimney pot, and a bit of wire that goes down to the tree at the end of the garden. I'd like a big tower, but I'm not even going to bother to ask for permission where I live. I don't think they'd be forthcoming. But yeah, good on the ARRL for supporting this guy, and I think it's. I say it every time. It's the other sort of reason that you should always be a member of your national body.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Colin has a saying, and it's an Irish saying that you don't ask if you can do it; you beg for forgiveness afterwards.
After you've done it,
yeah. So, yeah. What do you think, Chris?
Well, yeah, it just sounds like this is red tape and mad, doesn't it? I think the regulation, and it sounds like the court has obviously done the right thing and said, look, this is crazy. Why on earth is this town in New York? This company. I think the company's just going way over the top with its fees and just hoop over the hoop. So I think it's done the right thing. I think, yeah, absolutely. I think as Martin was saying, supporting your national society, they'll support you and they'll back you, and looks like they've done a good job here.
Yeah, that's a good one. I know Ed's been having internet problems in the last sort of 5 minutes. Ed, are you still with us?
Yeah, it seems to have calmed down again. But that being said, I don't think I can add anything to this that hasn't already been said.
Yeah, well, I sort of left you to the end hoping it was all going to sort itself out. But, yeah, I think this is a real positive one, Frank, and thanks for raising it with us. Okay, I'm going to close the news stories there. We're running exceedingly long, but I'm still going to do the quick wander around the table and see what you guys have been up to. Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, I've been in the year I was over in the States. I was in Virginia and I was in Tennessee. So when I was in Virginia, I sat with my friends who lives there at his house, putting an aerial up. So I had some fun doing that. I'm not going to say which call sign I used because I'll do best our earlier conversations, but I did a little bit of testing with it and it worked. It worked pretty well. So that was great fun. He's got quite a bit of land out there, so we had lots of space to put an aerial up, and we got quite a nice. It was a high gain trap dipole we put together, and I've never seen traps that are a metre long each. So it was an interesting aerial actually, but it looked pretty robust, and it was for 40 and 80 metres, and it worked pretty well. So I think he's quite pleased with that. I think he's planning to use that with some data modes. So that was good. Apart from that, I haven't really done any other radio since I think it was us on the podcast. Yeah.
Well, Christmas was a bit strange for us all, wasn't it? Because we were all busy, but kind of doing things, and yeah. So, but interestingly, your trip to the States went well. Moving along, Martin, you've done something really good yesterday.
Yesterday I went to the National Radio Centre up at Bletchley Park near Milton Keynes. Met with Icom, who were there promoting the IC-9700, their latest offering for the VHF UHF market, 270 23 SEMS SDR radio to complement the 7300 D-Star, everything all as standard. They have got, I forget what he referred to it was. It was an engineering model, but it's near as damn it the final product that will be released to the public that they've got over from Japan. I got to have my hands on it. I've had a play with it. I put a call through it. I've had a go with it. I've played with the software on it. It's a beautiful radio. I need to save my money to get one. I don't think I'm going to be able to afford it in the imminent future, but one day yes, I will have one of those radios. But yes, watch this space. Had an interview with one of the engineers from Icom, so that will be coming up in the podcast, hopefully in this episode if I can get it edited in time. If not, it will definitely be in the next episode. And other than that, what have I been doing? Been playing with a bit of D-Start, as you do. Yesterday I went on to the 23 SEMS UK activity evening. It's sort of a contest, but not, in the fact that, yes, you give a real signal report, you give them a serial number and your locator square, then you have a 5-minute chat afterwards, just because you can. So I was playing with 23 SEMS last night, which was a bit of fun. And also been playing with the Fusion repeater. We've got a little bit of an issue with it at the moment. You send it a link command, and the repeater keys up, but the radio doesn't always receive the message saying you are connected or you are connected to the server. If I do it on the uplink radio, on the input frequency, it responds fine. So it seems to be a problem with the repeater itself. I don't know if that's to do with our slightly less than ideal SWR we've got at the moment. I mentioned earlier we've got water in the coax up there I've got to go and change, or something else, I don't know. But we will have to find out. But that's pretty much my week in radio.
Yeah, you've been busy. Dan, what have you been up to since, the new year, really?
Well, it's always lots of things, but probably the coolest thing I did was I bought a new computer for the shack. And I didn't buy a new computer. I bought a refurbished one off Amazon. And I had been making do with a really El Cheapo laptop. And man, what a difference this new computer makes. It works a lot faster. And I was having a problem when I was running the digital modes, where if I had too many I like to have lots of windows open at a time. So if I had too many windows open, that it didn't seem to want to synchronize properly. Like the computer just didn't have enough horsepower. And with this one, I just haven't run into that problem at all. So I'm ecstatic. I spent like $130 on this refurbished computer, and it's turned out to be a really nice deal.
Yeah, sounds good to me, Dan. Well, I got I've been rebuilding my shack, and I was showing Martin at the weekend. Biggest problem I've got is that I'm using a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse as opposed to a wireless keyboard and mouse. And unfortunately, every time I key up, the computer loses the keyboard and mouse on HF.
Oh, geez.
Yep, so, I've had that problem.
Yeah, so we're going to probably go to a wireless one or even a hardwired one, but there you go.
I've got to be honest with you, I will always buy a wired mouse and keyboard. The problems I've had over the years with wireless mouse and keyboard has just been a nightmare. In fact, on HMS Belfast, I didn't take it away, but I bought a pound shop, or I guess like a dollar store equivalent mouse that's on the computer there, which actually works far better than the mouse that was there before, which was wireless. So that's me on my little soapbox there. Sorry.
Yeah, you're dead right. But I was trying to be nice, and anyway, it didn't work particularly well. So it's probably going to have a wired mouse and keyboard in soon. Ed, what have you been up to?
I mentioned, I think last time I was on, I've been working with Don Toma, YO3GGX, testing and helping him with some documentation of his remote control software program for Android, Pocket RxTX. And I'm very glad to bring an exclusive here to ICQ Podcast to announce that version 3 is going to be released by the start of February. And that one includes support for a lot more different radios and a few more features, and really a very nice package. You know, you can control any of the current, most of the current modern rigs from anywhere in the world, from your smartphone or tablet, anywhere in the world over the internet. And it's also a web SDR client as well, so you've got effectively a radio in your hand as well. So very, very nice bit of software, and very good that the basic version is free. The pro version gives you a couple of more features and no adverts, and even that's like €3 or something, so it's not expensive. The other thing I've been working on, I've built myself a new portable antenna for SOTA. built it, but I haven't been able to get outside with the storms and the snow and everything to actually test it. So that's just laying on the floor. So something I want to get done soon. Okay, back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems, no problems. Frank, you been busy over the Christmas period?
I have, and apparently someone thought I was a good boy. I added some equipment to my workbench, an HP 3324A function sweep generator and a Tektronix 2465 analog scope to go along with my digital scope. And I've got a Regal DP711 programmable power supply that will be delivered Friday, and it'll work with my Nuo programmable load. I've been on a 3-year kind of cycle, try to build workbench to design and build things, and so I'm making some progress, and enough progress to add a second 19-inch IT rack for equipment. I guess if you measure it in feet, that's progress, and if I ever learn how to use all of it, that will be another thing. but I'm having fun and wanted to do this for a long time. So that was kind of the Christmas thing. I'm changing a couple of repeaters over to Fusion here. They're on broadcast towers. I'm working with the ham who controls those towers and getting those repeaters, the firmware updated to the latest and programmed and duplexers tuned and some things like that. So been busy and still building out some of those battery bank power boxes. So staying with it and kicking off the new year right, melting solder and reading meters.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've been really, really busy, Frank. And so all of you have been busy. My side, radio operating has probably only been VHF, UHF, mainly from the car. Some of it simplex, some of it repeaters. I did come across a YouTube video more by accident, and I'm probably late to the party on this one, but there's a company called Sonoff, SONOFF, that produce home automation switches. And they're like, all right, they're Chinese, but they're the square root of nothing for these devices. I mean, you can have a internet-connected Wi-Fi switch for something like $5. You know, so you can switch things on and off. Lots of YouTube videos. If you're really into hacking them, they program very similar to an Arduino, and there's even a guy showing you how you can upgrade the memory chip on them for something like about 30 cents. So I don't profess to be very knowledgeable on these, but I've been looking at them, and I've got a few to play with. I bought a few to play with, and the initial results is that Mrs. B was quite pleased with the results I was doing on something for her. Did a fair amount of reading, but Mrs. B's been on holiday for the last week, which normally means Martin's in fix mode, because she'll sit there and go, this don't work. And then I have to stop whatever I'm doing and go over and fix it. And so I've been fixing things for Mrs. B, and she's got a new phone at the moment, so that's been a problem. And one last thing I mentioned on the last podcast, but I'll mention it again. Colin and Bill are working on a new award scheme, a Work Tool ICQ. So guys, don't be surprised if somebody says I'm adding you to my Work to ICQ log. How they're going to get hold of Colin is going to be.
If you manage to get Colin, I think you get a special prize, don't you?
Yeah, I think they were saying that.
I don't even think half of us have worked Colin, have we?
I think I once, possibly, yeah, when it was over.
Yeah, maybe when he's at the show.
Yeah, on that Sonoff device, I'd look, when you mentioned it to me before previously, I'd look on Amazon. There are some mixed reviews on that. I know I played one, so I can't. So this is not my personal experience, but there are some mixed reviews about the safety. So Martin, I'm sure you've looked at it yourself, but just wanted to check out yourself. So if you're going to buy one, make sure you check it out and make sure you're happy with the safety. That's all.
Yeah. I think certainly what I saw, it looks quite safe. But buyer beware. You do this at your own risk. I'm not holding anybody's hand. It's exactly the same with working on live equipment or mains equipment. You know, you have to buyer beware. But it certainly looked reasonable. Martin saw one of the things working here at my house on Sunday when he popped round. we were shouting at the Amazon Alexa to turn the light on, and it was turning it on and off remotely, which was quite reasonable, wasn't it, Martin?
Yeah, it works. So all we need to do now is just stand outside Martin's house. If he doesn't answer his doorbell, you just shout out, "Alexa, socket on," and the lights start coming on. So if he doesn't answer his doorbell, that's the way, because the lights will just go off.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, Martin, before we say 73, I had some feedback from one of our listeners.
Go on.
You were just saying, and just perhaps something to think about, when we do the round table, we all say 73, but our listeners need to be aware that's not the end of the podcast. So it's just the end of this section. So listen, guys, if you listen to the podcast now and you hear us all say in a second 73, don't press stop, because there's a lot more after that comes afterwards from Colin, and there's a feature as well.
Yeah, good point. Good point. That's just the end. That's us saying 73s to each other at the end of recording this session. So, okay, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. It's gone very long, but I apologise on that. I think the guys have enjoyed themselves. So I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Thank you, Martin and guys. It's been fun as it always is.
No problems, Chris. I'd like to thank Mr. Martin Rothwell.
No problem at all. Do you know what? In radio, they tell us not to say goodbye. They just say finish on the song and say and the feature is next.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
My pleasure as always.
Thanks, Dan. And I know we've gone a bit long, but hopefully Mrs. isn't going to be standing giving you grief for tea. And Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP, who's an hour after us, so it's getting well late for you, Ed, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 20 past 11 p.m. And sorry about the bad audio at times, guys. Network plays up when we've got storms outside.
Yeah, it happens, Ed. It's Skype, we know. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Hey, listen, great to be with you again in 2019. And as they used to tell us not to say in radio, this has been your presenter speaking.
There you go. There you go. Well, I'm going to keep with tradition and say 73s to you all, but this is not the end of the podcast. 73, guys.
Cheers, guys.
73.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. And we start with great news here in Holland. The Dutch amateur radio exams recently had pass rates of 88% and 66.7% achieved in the latest novice and full amateur radio exams held. The exams were held in early January, and for the foundation exam there were 24 candidates, of which 16 were successful. In the N exam, the novice exam, there were 25 candidates, and of these 22 of those passed. So congratulations to all those new amateurs in Holland and those that have advanced on to the full level, and I hope you continue to enjoy our hobby. My thanks goes to Malcolm Howell here, Foxtrot for Victor Romeo X-Ray here from France. Dropped us a mail from ICQpodcast.com. He says, just thought I'd share this tidbit from the ANFR, the body responsible for radio licensing in France. They've just cancelled the annual fee for radio licenses as of the end of 2018. So in France, they'll no longer continue to pay an annual fee for a license, which was approximately €46. So Malcolm's forwarded us the link, which we'll put on the ICQ podcast website. So I say good news there for amateurs in France, or those thinking of moving to France, that you don't have to pay your annual fee there now for your radio license. And continuing the good news theme throughout Europe, new technical requirements have been announced in Bulgaria this week. And due to the commitment of the BFRA, Belgian amateurs have attained some important changes. We've removed the age limit of the acquisition of a Class 2 license for VHF and UHF with a power of no more than 5 watts and HF from a club station. They've established a minimum age of 14 to obtain a Class A license, which is for all bands with full legal power. Removed the mandatory 6-month period between the Class 2 and Class 1 exams, and had a significant increase in power allowed in most bands. Maximum output now is 1000 watts in stationary mode, or 1500 watts allowed when participating in international contests. So good news there for amateurs in Bulgaria. Well, now we head on to our features episode, Martin Rothwell's first impressions of the new IC-9700 from Icom. Hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hey there, it's Martin M0SGL, and for this episode's feature, I was invited to the RSGB's National Radio Centre just outside Milton Keynes at Bletchley Park. Inside, I met with other members of the amateur radio press and many of the well-known traders, while Icom officially announced the new Icom IC-9700, their brand new VHF, UHF, all-mode plus D-Star radio. I caught up with Bob Rogers, G6KKW, one of Icom's HF engineers, to talk about the radio. I apologise in advance for the background noise. We had waited for some people to leave, but as with any interview recorded outside of a studio, background noise is inevitable. So the Icom 9700, there's one here. It's no longer a rumour, is it?
Yeah, we've got an engineering sample from Japan, and we've just been launching it to the press.
So this is the well overdue replacement for the Icom 910 or the 910X, matching the Icom 7300, of course the HF 6-metre, 4-metre radio, but this is covering 270 and 23, almost plus D-Star, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's very high performance receiver. It's a full SDR up to 77s, and then with a mixer for the 1200 meg section.
Okay, and this is a prototype, or is this the final product that we are going to expect to be seeing in the UK soon?
This is actually an engineering sample. It's very, very close to the final product.
What's the story behind this? So it's the 910 came out, I've had my 910 for 10 years at least. I don't know how old it was when I bought it. How long has this been in development? Do you know that?
No, we don't specifically, actually. We found that the 7300 was the first of the SDRs. We then got the 7610, the 8600, and this one's followed on from all that. I think we were just waiting for the technology to catch up so they would get to UHF with an SDR.
Mm-hmm. And for those of that perhaps new to the hobby, SDR, what's the key benefits of a software-defined radio over a conventional radio that we might be used to?
Well, they respond less to out-of-band signals because they don't rely on the purity of a local oscillator for the way they respond to interfering signals. The filtering is far sharper.
And so the 9700, we mentioned it covers 270 and 23. What's the power output on this?
100 watts on 2, 75 watts on 70, and 10 watts on 23.
Okay, and the 910, okay, no, I'm sorry to compare it to the 910, it is the natural progression. Supported satellite operation. Do we see that in the 9700 as well?
Yeah, it's got full duplex. It's also got normal and reverse tuning, tracking tuning, so you can track satellites.
Okay, and with the standard package that you buy, so if I go into my ham radio dealer once it's released, what am I getting in the box? Because when I bought the 910, I think I paid extra for the 23 SEMS module. I know some of the earlier Icom radios, I think you paid for the D-Star option, and some radios you pay for filters. What do we get in the box as standard with this?
Everything's in with this one. There are no options. The 1200 megs is standard. That's the first really on anything in the UK, I believe. And the preamps are already in there. It's just got everything. It's
just everything under in the box already. There's nothing you need to pay for. That's a fantastic thing. And okay, we talk about people running a radio like this and running them on repeaters, which okay, people we know are going to do this. Is there alphanumeric character tagging in this, or is that still at too early days to be able to confirm?
You know, I haven't even checked. That's something I don't know.
What about programming in things like repeaters and satellites and that? Is this easy from the front panel, or is there a separate programming software available that we have to run with?
You don't really need anything. It's all very, very straightforward. It isn't the kind of set that's designed to have loads and loads of banks and memories for scanning and stuff like that. In fact, we don't even expect it to be possible to broadband this one. We expect it to be limited to amateur bands for performance reasons. But I think if you imagine a very, very high performance VHF, UHF microwave set designed primarily for weak signal working, for contesting, for that kind of thing, that's the kind of grader set you're looking at. And so it probably won't have all the alphanumeric tags and things like that, which you'll typically find on a scanner, but it's not really that kind of radio.
It mentions certainly one of the early specs that it has voice recording on the SD card.
Yeah.
What does that offer? I mean, is that just for recording rare tropospherics, or does that allow you to record your CQ call and play that out?
Yeah, you can put all your standard calls down on there. If you're using it for contesting or anything like that, or you can use it for received audio. You can do that.
I noticed on the back there's an Ethernet port. What is that for?
That's to connect it straight to a computer, so you can use it for remote operation without a standalone computer. It has its own address.
So effectively, we plug an Ethernet cable into that, into my home router from BT or whoever. Open a couple of ports and that's it. And what software are we using to run that with?
RSBA1, latest version.
Which is available, of course, from Icom. And what about for CAT interfacing? So for people controlling the radio from their computer, is that go over the network, or do we have a USB connection for that?
Yeah, we've got on the other side of the back panel. You'll see there's a USB-B, and that's the connection they use for that.
And that has a built-in sound card with it, I understand, as well,
It does, yeah.
Okay, so we can do things like whisper and digital modes through there. Now, with the ID, I'm thinking of the ID51, there's a cable you can interface it to your phone or PC. You can send pictures through D-Star.
Yeah, you can do that with this one.
So you can do that through this as well?
Yeah, it's got 128K data mode.
Mm-hmm. And with D-Star, the data mode that you mentioned, and this possibly relates to, I think it's the ID1, my understanding of that, you could use it almost to send data, almost like an Ethernet signal at about 128K.
Yeah.
Is that what this is supporting as well?
Yes, it's got what you call terminal mode and access mode on D-Star. So yeah, I haven't really experienced a lot of people using that data facility on D-Star yet, but it is available, and surely people will do.
And just to confirm, this may be a really silly thing to be asking. A lot of people wrongly dismiss D-Star because, and I quote, "Oh, it's Icom proprietary." Now, can you just confirm, from someone who works for Icom, from the horse's mouth, if you will, that D-Star isn't an Icom proprietary technology? It's
No, it's a JARL protocol which was developed by some amateurs in Japan, and we've adopted it, and Ken would have adopted it as well.
Yeah, exactly. So you've just embraced the amateur technology. Icom, of course, do have their own digital technology. I think IDAS, don't they, that works in the PMR world. So there's obviously a touchscreen display on this showing the waterfall of current activity, brings up lots of additional options. I had to play with the radio, really, really intuitive to use. I think I pretty much mastered most of the basic features in the few minutes I was playing with it. For the geeks, what kind of touchscreen is this? Do you know?
4.3-inch TFT.
Okay. And is it capacitive? Is it resistive? Or do we not?
Capacitive.
Capacitive touchscreen. Fantastic. What about current accessories for this? Is there anything out at the moment, or is it obviously it's not in the UK yet?
Well, I don't know of any preamps that are planned by the company. There used to be VHF and UHF preamps, and we've got voltage output which you can select from the radio to power preamps. Mm-hmm. You can use that clearly for other third-party ones, but I'm not sure if it's planned for Icom to produce some more preamps, state-of-the-art ones. They may be, I don't know. There's things like carrying handles and the usual stuff, speakers, power supplies, that general kind of thing.
The million-dollar question, of course, when can we expect to see it in the UK?
I'm going to be very honest about this and give you my best guess. I think probably the spring.
And do we know an approximate cost for this yet? And the initial figures thinking around 1,800, but
it seems to be that's will be around about the mark. Yeah.
Around about it. And bearing in mind, of course, there's a lot more tech under the hood with this than there was with some of the earlier radios. So I think I paid about 1,400 for the 910.
Yes, in relative terms, they're quite a bargain. But I think you're now seeing the cost advantage of the SDRs coming to the market. They are a little bit better to produce, and so you'll see that cost advantage being passed on now, I think.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, well, Bob Rogers, G6KKW, thank you very much for talking to us, and thanks for the invite today.
Oh, thank you.
During my visit, I was able to get my hands on the radio and have a play. In fact, I feel quite privileged, as I'm actually one of the first people in the UK outside of Icom to get my hands on the device. I've had the Icom IC-9700 for over 10 years, so what are my thoughts of the IC-9700? Well, this is one serious piece of kit, extremely well built and well thought out. Icom have clearly taken the best bits from some of their other radios and refined this technology to build the IC-9700. It sits in the same form factor as the IC-7300, so should sit really nicely on your desk. And in particular, I love the ease of setting up remote operation, having to do little more than connecting an Ethernet cable between it and a router. Now, many radios are bogged down with extensive menus and buttons that you have to press and hold together to find options. As well as I didn't go into every option on the radio, I did find it very easy and very intuitive to use from the front panel without any prompting at all. For more information, head on over to Icom's website at icomuk.co.uk. But I would like to run one piece of audio again for those that still think that D-Star is Icom proprietary. D-Star isn't an Icom proprietary technology. It's
No, it's a JARL protocol which was developed by some amateurs in Japan.
So don't be too fast to dismiss D-Star. It's a great mode that's far too often overlooked. So, bottom line, will I be buying one? Honestly, yes. But with an estimated cost of around £1,800, it may not be on day one for me, but it's definitely on my wish list. Thanks for listening. I hope this has been of interest.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Well, many thanks there to Martin Rothwell, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima. Your trip there to the launch of the IC-9700 and your first impressions are greatly appreciated. And Dad, it certainly sounds like it could be a very interesting product there coming on stream from Icom.
Certainly was, Colin. Certainly was. And as I say, it's a shame that the rest of the team couldn't make it. But hats off to Martin. You know, the ICQ presenters do all these trips off their own back. And it's not just financial, which would be quite an amount on this trip. But it's also he had to take a day's holiday off of his full-time job, you know, to go and do it. So I hope, guys, you appreciate it. It's something that, Martin wanted to see, and he was very excited about it. And as I say, we do try and bring you up to date all the latest stuff when we find out about it, don't we, Colin?
Exactly so. So thanks a lot there, Martin. And as I say, next time I see you, there's definitely a beer in it from me for that. So thanks a lot for that there. Well, as always, we'd like to thank our donors who help keep the podcast show advert free, and along with our monthly and annual subscription donors, Charles Bennett, Alpha India 6 Tango Tango, is our one-off donor in this episode. That's now quite a good run now of donors keeping us advert free. You can do your bit by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you send away is always greatly appreciated and invests into the show. While you're there, you may also consider sponsoring the new ICQ Podcast Presenter t-shirts. There's still some slots available for listeners to have their name and call sign on the sleeve of our upcoming new t-shirts, which will be debuted at Hamvention in Dayton, Ohio in May. So check that out, and just for a small donation, you can have your name on your favourite presenter's shirt, or well, maybe even your not so favourite presenters, because it covers all of them. But certainly you can do it from there for you there. As always, get in contact with us as the usual ways. The website, icqpodcast.com, the Facebook group, Twitter handles, at M1MRB and at Colin Butler, where you can get in touch with us there. Our thanks to this episode's Roundtable team: Chris Howard, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, and Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel for taking part in the round table. So thanks a lot there for you guys in taking part. And if you haven't done it yet and you want to see our beautiful radio vases, you can check out the ICQ Podcast YouTube channel at youtube.com/ICQ Podcast. God, I tell you what, that list is starting to get a bit long there, Dad. I might have to clean that up a bit, you know, because, big long list like that, what you realise is it takes longer to make Mrs. B a cup of tea.
Certainly does, but she's worth every cup of tea I make her, trust me. So great round table this time. Quite humorous, quite light this one I think was, and I think the fairness is the guys are starting to get excited about Dayton. So we're starting to get excited about Dayton, and it's not just the guys on this side of the pond, because I don't believe Bill or Frank have ever been to Dayton. So it's beginning to ramp up. We're getting all excited. Looking forward to it. And I'm now going to go and make that lovely Mrs. B a cup of tea, and I'll find her a chocolate biscuit tonight when she comes in a few minutes' time. Back to you, Colin.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, listen, you go do that, and I'll bid 73s to everybody, and we'll catch up with you all again, guys, in a fortnight's time. 73s all.
Yeah, 73.